Let's take a look at federal politics now, because the federal government is facing criticism after it approved permits for new gas exploration off the coast of Victoria, South Australia and Tasmania. Dr Sophie Scamps is an independent MP from Sydney's Northern Beaches. She has spent this term in Parliament campaigning for climate action and was backed, of course, by the Climate 200 group at the last election. She joins us now from Sydney. Dr Scamps, good morning.
Good morning.
The government's been pretty clear on this, that gas is going to be part of Australia's energy mix as part of the transition to renewable electricity. So surely this news didn't come too much of a surprise to you?
Look, I think everyone accepts broadly that gas does need to be a part of that equation as we transition away from fossil fuels. But we also can't ignore the fact that the International Energy Agency and the UN have said very, very clearly that there can be no new coal or gas mining if we are to have a livable future. So let's just have a look at the lie of the land. Australia is one of the biggest gas exporters in the world. We export up to 80% of what we mine here, and yet we're facing a shortfall here in Australia. So we're kind of in this crazy, ludicrous situation where we might have to import our own gas back. And looking at it further, it becomes more nonsensical the deeper you look into it. Japan is one of our greatest export partners when it comes to gas. They get around 43% of their gas imports from Australia, yet over the last 3 years they have exported around about that same amount. They've exported that amount of gas to other countries. So it might be that we end up in a situation where we are competing against Japan for the sale of our own gas, yet having to import our own gas. So it's this crazy situation that we find ourselves in.
So just on the exports then, as you mentioned, Australia is a big gas exporter. If not for more exploration, what would you like to see happen then to ensure Australia has domestic supply? Are you talking about maybe ripping up those contracts, putting in place an East Coast gas reservation, things like that?
Look, it has been really poorly managed over the years. But yes, as you see in WA, there was a reservation policy over there. We should be keeping more of our gas here in Australia and using it for us rather than importing it at higher prices from other countries. It is ludicrous. And when we look at what we're actually making from our gas exports, it's really troubling as well. When we look at a comparable country such as Qatar, who export around about the same amount of gas that Australia does, they earn 20 times the amount of revenue that Australia does. I think just in 2023 we made about $2.3 billion from the PRRT, the Petroleum Resource Rent Tax, but we subsidised the fossil fuel industry up to $10 billion. So we really need to look at how we're managing our resources here in Australia and how Australians, the average Aussie, is benefiting from our resources. So something does need to change. It does need to be looked at.
The government's been pretty clear that getting rid of these contracts would cause huge damage to Australia's reputation or changing the status quo. There have been a few concerns raised about potential shortages of gas in Australia's domestic supply later this decade, and a report out today shows that gas has been doing some pretty heavy lifting in recent months to power Australia. Do you think there's no case at all then, as the Minister has argued, for more exploration just to ensure that households over the next few years can get a reliable supply of gas at a reasonable price?
Well, we do need a reasonable price, and if we're having to import our gas that we've sold at a higher price, then that is crazy. Australians should not be paying such high prices for our gas. We should be reserving some of that so that we're not paying those really high energy prices as we transition our energy sector. But looking again at what's happening in Japan, we are exporting a huge amount of our gas to Japan, and they are exporting it to countries that we are competing with for the sale of our own gas. There is something that is not functioning right in this whole sector, and we need to look at what's happening. It is problematic, and we're also not benefiting in the same way that other countries are. When we look at Qatar, when we look at Norway, Norway has a sovereign wealth fund built off their resources that is worth $2.something trillion. We, on the other hand, are charging more. We're getting more revenue from our students who are trying to get a tertiary education through HECS than what we were receiving in petroleum resource rent tax from the sale of our gas. It's crazy.
Dr Scamps, just on another issue, you represent one of the wealthiest parts of the nation. There's a report out today suggesting another report suggesting that people are having fewer babies. Can you understand why, and what should be done to try to get more Australians having children?
Look, Mackellar, which is the northern beaches of Sydney, is often represented as one of the most wealthy, and there certainly are very wealthy pockets. But we also have areas where people are doing it extremely tough. The thing that I'm hearing out on the streets and when we're door knocking is the cost of living. People are really struggling at the moment. So things as simply as their students paying for HECS, all sorts of things, for childcare, for medical care. All these things are super expensive, as well as that is rent prices and mortgages. People are finding it extremely hard just to get through the days, to find somewhere to live. So of course, when you're in that type of situation, it is difficult to plan for the future and think about how you're going to raise children. So so this comes back to what we're doing with our own fossil fuels. If we were actually taxing export on fossil fuels properly, then we could be paying for things like early childhood education, proper preschool for all children, better access to healthcare and your GPs, and HECS. So it comes down to things like that. So we do need to be looking at our energy policy and how we are taxing our gas exports.
All right, Dr. Sophie Scamps, we're out of time, but thank you so much for speaking with News Breakfast this morning.
Thank you.